Welcome back to the Home CEO podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Jakes, and today I have a very special guest, Min from @kidfriendly.meals. She's joining us to talk about one of the most important and sometimes challenging topics for parents, which is kids' foods. As parents, we all know the daily struggle of trying to get our little ones to eat healthy and nutritious meals without turning mealtime into a battlefield. And Min, with her wealth of knowledge and creative approach to children's nutrition, is here to share her expert insights, practical tips, delicious recipes that make mealtime both fun and nutritious for kids and the parents trying to feed them. We'll be discussing everything from picky eating solutions to balanced meal ideas and even some sneaky ways to get more veggies on those plates. So let's dive in and discover how we can make feeding our children a joyful and stress-free experience, which is what we do here. Less mess, less stress, and more success. Let's dive in.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just so wonderful to be here.
So Min and I connected on social media, as I do with most of my Instagram friends, which are real friends, as you've seen. We take trips together, we talk behind the scenes, but Min's account is one of those I go to constantly when I'm helping friends in the younger years of feeding their kids. You know, they're always like, Nicole, did you home make your baby food? And I'm like, yes, of course I did. And they're like, do I really need to do that? And I'm always like, just go check out kidfriendly.meals. So Min, talk to me about how you created this platform. Tell us a little bit about you. Take me from step A to B. How did we come up with kid-friendly meals?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that when you first invited me to be a guest on your podcast, the first thing that I thought was, I'm not a home CEO. What does that even mean? I didn't even think I was qualified for this, but the more I thought about it, I just thought to myself, just stop it. We are just our worst critics, you know? And so I just took a moment to celebrate, acknowledge everything, I've been able to accomplish over the years. And so I am just so thankful for the reminder, first of all. And so thank you for having me on. So how did I get to where I am? So I feel like there are just so many misinformation out there or there's just so much information in general about feeding babies and toddlers, and it was just really overwhelming. And when I first became a mom and was trying to prepare myself for starting solids, I was just so shocked by just how much of it seemed to be conflicting. The source will say, do this, and then another will say, no, don't do that, do this instead. And so, at that time, my specialty as a dietitian was in autoimmune diseases. So I was working with patients with celiac and Hashimoto's. When I became a mom, I just dove into the area of pediatrics so I can be fully equipped to feed my own son. And at that time, I wasn't thinking about helping other families or any of that. I started my account and it was my son's name with the foodie added to it. And it was just a place for me to share what I was serving him every single day. And it was a way for me to keep myself accountable to the goal that I had set, because I wanted to introduce him to as many variety of foods and flavors and textures, just knowing that I'm sharing something and putting it out into the world. It was just a way to keep myself accountable for the meals that I want to be serving to my son. And so that's kind of where it all started, not knowing that I would soon grow a following through that, because other moms and families are like, oh, what are you serving there? Oh, that I hadn't thought of that. That's such a great idea. And so it just kind of a community just naturally, just organically blossomed in this beautiful way. And so that's kind of that was the starting point. And here I am, he is now 7 and I account everything, my business and all of that to him. So he's who started this whole thing. And so it's just been a wild and a beautiful journey.
I love that. I think so many of the people I talk to in our generation or even younger are I started this off of a mother's love. And I think that that's something that as a community, if you are a mom and listening to this, you can relate to. You're going through something and there's trials and tribulations, or you need an accountability person to say, okay, I'm going to make these meals, or I'm going to, run this sleep pattern. And we turn to social media for that. So your account to me just feels so organic and authentic. And when I reached out, my main goal was to help share your knowledge, because you have a very approachable way to child nutrition that's easy to digest, no pun intended, It is beautiful, but it also is very relatable. So talk to me about, you have a person, let's say you have a mom coming to you and she's like, we're just about to start solids. What are some tips that you could give just initially on how to start solids for a good foundation for your child's relationship with food?
So when you're first starting, I know that like we just want to have all the ducks in a row, but sort of the main thing that you want to learn, whether you're doing purees or baby-led weaning, I feel like there's a lot of like, they're like at war, like you're either team purees or team baby-led weaning, and you could really do both of that. Not one is better than the other. It's just what fits your family's needs and what you feel comfortable with. You know, I know a lot of families who are very anxious around feeding soft, finger foods. And if you're anxious, your baby is going to sense that, and it's not going to go well for anybody. So it's whatever like your heart feels and works best for your family. We did baby-led weaning. I did baby-led weaning with both of my kids, and so that's sort of my specialty. But I support everybody and all like in their decisions. So I always want to create that community in that sense of this is a judgment-free zone. The most important thing is to make sure that your baby is ready to start solids. And so I provide, like they are able to sit up straight for several seconds on their own. They are they are at least 6 months of age, and that's kind of important. Now, every baby is different. So it's not like once they hit 6 months, it's like, okay, if you're ready to go. But it is sort of a good starting point because there is information out there where you can start babies earlier than that. But normally that's sort of when they start showing all the signs of readiness. And then really focusing on introducing a variety of flavors and textures from early on. There is this window of opportunity, as we call it, where before they turn 1, they are most willing to accept new foods. And so that this is a time to really focus on early on for like setting a strong foundation for developing the preference, developing a likeness towards vegetables and all the things, because research shows that they are born with this innate preference for sweet things, and bitter foods they reject. So the earlier you can introduce them, the more. They are not guaranteed, because then you have babies who are like, oh, they loved all the vegetables, and then they turn 2, and then they're like, they become this, they are rejecting everything. So we can talk about that too, that it's not necessarily always like your fault in what you didn't do, but it is important in that first year to set that strong nutritional foundation. But as someone who has struggled from an eating disorder for many, many years, I'm also passionate about helping like all of us in this community to raise not only healthy, but like happy and mindful eaters who have a healthy relationship with food. Like fruits and vegetables, we know that they are great for our bodies, and I share in simple, tasty, like doable ways to include them in your little one's meals. But as kids grow, it's also so, if not even more important, to teach them that food isn't just about nutrition. Like not every bite needs to be perfect, and there's always room for like pizza and ice cream. Those are like my 2 favorite things. Like not every bite. Yeah, it doesn't need to be perfect. There's always room for that. Like food is also about creating memories, like nourishing our souls, connecting with others. And so it's all about embracing all the foods and finding that right balance and teaching them that foods, they're no good or bad foods. They all fit. And so that's sort of kind of what I'm passionate about.
I love it. And you can see it not only on your page, but just chatting with you. I think we have to look at things holistically. I talk about that a lot. I talk about that with our house and our cycles of cleaning and chores. And it's the same with food. And leading in your intuition is always a good thing, although hard when we live in a very chaotic, busy world. But especially with kiddos, I was talking with my son the other day. We've been having some meltdowns here and there. And I was like, maybe it's sleep. So we course corrected sleep. Wasn't sleep. Like, well, maybe it's something in nutrition. So we kind of are starting now the nutrition, just upping certain ingredients in what we're eating and consuming each day. How do you think, especially in those younger years, you've done a great job explaining to me how to really introduce them and give them a solid foundation. How does food impact behavior? And is that something as a parent, we should be cognizant of? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
I guess one thing that that really comes to my mind and that a lot of families struggle with is that we're all raising like carb monsters and all they want is like carbs. And then they get hungry like right after because it wasn't filling. And people are always so focused on, I need to get more protein and fat and all of that, which are important. But biologically, they need the carbs. Like they don't need as much protein as we think that they do. Because as adults, we're always like, oh, I need protein to, grow muscles and, all of those things. But for kids, carbs are really their fuel, and they are doing a lot running around, and they have lots of energy, and they need that glucose. But at the same time, you can try to think of ways to make them a little bit more filling by adding, like, instead of just serving bread or crackers, adding some cheese or some peanut butter or some yogurt to serve with it, so that they can go fuller for longer, and that they won't get cranky, and it will kind of help you to stay out of the kitchen for a bit longer, like, so you're not in there all the time. And I think that predictability and routine is so important for our kids. And so before, like, even going into that meltdown phase, having a structure where they're being served food, having a snack or a meal every 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 hours, however, like, depending on your child's age and their needs. Because they'll go through like random growth spurts where they're like, I'm just hungry all the time. And that happens to us too. Like, and then I realized, oh, wow, she's gotten taller, or like, they were going through a growth spurt. And so kind of setting that structure of the mealtime schedule is so important, I think, so that they're not just constantly grazing throughout the day, because that could really affect their mood. And so I always, when I'm working with families, I always say, hey, when are they eating? When are they eating breakfast, lunch, dinner? Are they predictable? Are they spaced out appropriately? And that helps calm a lot of meltdowns, actually.
Absolutely. I think it's all about that sustainability and energy. And I think, just looking off of my own personal profile with a boy and a girl, they're different. They have different needs, and they also kind of eat on different schedules. So it's always funny because my son will need something right in the morning, but my daughter tends to like go a little slower. We broke grazing because of dental, right? I went to the dentist with the kids, and she's like, are they grazers? And I was like, how did you know? And she's like, well, I can tell by like their teeth structure, and there was a cavity. And I was like, oh. And then I got brought into, do they have gummy vitamins? This is years ago. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, let's course correct. And it's how I kind of got them back in sync to my earlier days of being a mom and making all their food, and everything was homemade. They get influenced by friends as they get older. And so I always like to have them have a balance, but that's exactly what it is, right? The meals now that they have 5 or 6 different things, and they're all there for them. And usually they get eaten because then they're hungry. But the schedule is key, as so many things are with kids. And it's always changing. What worked last month doesn't work this month.
Yep.
Which is so key. Hey there, home CEOs. Tired of playing guess the origin with your meat at the grocery store? Well, I was too. Where you squint at the labels and hope the meat's travel history isn't more exotic than yours. I want to introduce you to Good Ranchers. This one, I've done the homework, so you don't have to. They're born and bred right here in the USA, and their meat is as local as your favorite coffee shop. So since 2018, they've been bringing families back to the dinner table, where all great change in America starts. With Good Ranchers, you're not just ordering the finest cuts of USDA prime beef, chicken, and wild-caught seafood. You're also giving the boot to the mystery meat imports and some more American farms. Subscribe today and save $25 on every order. That's right. Keep your wallet and your belly full with Good Ranchers American meat delivered, because good food is where the home is. Talk to me about your theories on mealtime, because I implemented a lot of your tips from your page after listening to you, countless reels on stories. And I was like, your mealtime theory and how you make mealtime an enjoyable place to be has changed my family dynamic. Can you talk about that?
I always say, like, yes, what we serve our babies is important, our children is important, but more importantly, it's how they're being served. And so, like, I always say, make dinner table a place like our children want to be. And so what that would look like in practice is like not watching your child like a hawk as they eat, like counting, like, oh, are they eating their chicken? Are they eating their healthy fats and all of that? And instead making meal times more about spending time together. Like, we have this tradition now, and we look forward to it, like the kids look forward to it too. Like, we pass around this little stuffy, we call her Luna. It's a little stuffy penguin. And we pass around the dinner table and say one thing that happened, like, that nobody else knows because we weren't there with each other. So it's just a way for us to connect, or something that we're grateful for. And we pass around also because then whoever is holding Luna, nobody else can interrupt that. It's their stage. Like they can share to their heart's content. So, because you get, little children, they just start interrupting and talking over each other. So that's kind of like your stage. And so we love that. And so it's just like, trying to kind of come up with ways to make meal times more fun and interactive, that it's not just about food, because that's a lot of pressure on a child when you're like watching them and like, hey, eat this, eat that, or pressuring them or bribing them, or, just all of those things. And instead of commenting anything about food, like, hey, you need to eat this, or could you please try a bite of that, just role model, because actions speak louder than words. If like mommy and daddy's eating this broccoli, like, oh, maybe I'll give that a try and see. Or sometimes like if like I don't even put it on their plate and I'll put like a whole bunch on my plate, and all of a sudden like something on my food, like on my mommy's plate, is like it looks so much more delicious. And so, they'll eat off my plate or something, but it's just, the point of it is to make it fun. And then just avoiding negative feeding practices, because all of these practices may seem effective in the short term, but in the long term, they can actually decrease your child's preferences for that particular food, because they have begun to develop this negative association with it, and research supports that. And it's different for a lot of kids. Like for my daughter, like if I pressure her to eat or whatnot, she'd be like, no, no, and she would turn her head away, and it's done. But for my son, who is so much a people pleaser and a sensitive soul, if I bribe him, he'll eat it to please me. And that's not good either, because I want him to eat it because he enjoys it and he wants to, respecting your child's appetite and choices, like just like you want yours to be honored. I grew up in that clean your plate club, and that was just like, I was beyond full, but I had to finish everything on my plate because I wanted to respect my mom and make her happy.
Wow, you spoke to my soul. Hearing you say it here, though I can get that from, your page and your social channels, I was like, yes, yes, yes. I'm literally sitting here like, let her finish her sentence. Don't interrupt her. Like, that is exactly right. And I think, I didn't grow up in the clean your plate club. It was kind of like eat when you want, how you want. I think my mom taught me intuitive eating without even knowing she was doing it. It was just a byproduct of our environment. As she was just like putting food on the table. It was never like, hey, family meals were not a big deal for my family. So I was kind of raised a little different, but I found in the end, like my relationship to food was one of like love and respect, not comfort or negative. And I kind of had to learn, unfortunately, through being sick, products that didn't work for my body. So there's always an ebb and flow in everything that we do. But for my kids, I feel like that mentality you just shared is invaluable to parents. And if we really focus on mindset rather than we do this, and then we do this, and we just kind of work on thinking, I want my kids to have a healthy relationship with this, and I want to make this a joyful thing for them, with, us included, how great that is. And by the way, that is so true. We always have an extra fork on the table for people to take things off other people's plates. And if the fork is out there, you may take things off other people's plates. But if the fork is not, you have to stay to your plate, because sometimes my daughter wants to share and sometimes she doesn't. But I loved that when you were like, it's on mommy's plate, so it's more delicious. I was like,
but we can't do that with daddy's plate, because daddy is totally like Joey from Friends. He's like, I don't share food. And so they always just come to mommy and it's like, can I try some of that? Like, and then daddy just is in his own little world. So
well, I love that, because I have a very similar household, and that's why the extra fork in front of your plate to tell someone you can share is like our unspoken way of saying it's okay, come on in,
Yeah.
That is so funny. That is so funny. Talk to me about picky eating. Your theories on picky eating. Is it even okay to say they're a picky eater? I think that this is a common thing we run up against. I have my own theories on it, but I really want to hear from you. Like picky eating, calling kids a picky eater. What even is picky eating? Walk me through it.
I just feel like it's just so just thrown out there so nonchalantly, and just like if your child isn't eating broccoli one day, or like all of a sudden your child, like they may be great eaters, but like maybe they're just not eating one or two foods that you really want them to eat, then you're like, oh, my child has turned picky. Or, I just feel like we just get so fixated on certain foods. Like I know, like with working with a lot of families, they're so fixated on, it's like my child won't eat vegetables. They're so picky that we forget, oh my gosh. And then I kind of, like, it's like, tell me more. Like, what are the other foods that your child eats or doesn't eat? And they're like, oh, well, my child eats, loves all fruits and, love eggs and yogurt. And I'm like, that child is not a picky eater. Like, we just get so like, hyper focused on this maybe one aspect of feeding or like food group or foods that we want our children to eat. And then we're very quick to blame ourselves, and say like, oh, they're fussy eaters, or they won't eat this, or they're picky because I didn't do XYZ. But the truth is, it's not always, or it's just not all about food. There are so many like developmental changes that are happening during those early years that significantly impact eating behaviors that, you may not have been aware of. Like for example, growth slows down significantly during the first year. Trying to think on top of my head, like I think like babies, like they triple their birth weights, and then during toddlerhood, like the average weight gain is around 4 to 6 pounds. So their interest in food and appetite decreases quite a bit, as they enter toddlerhood. They are becoming their own people and love to test boundaries. I don't know about your kids, but like my kids, their favorite word was no. No, no. And also there's this like clinically proven thing called food neophobia, which it just means like fear of new foods. And that has been shown to peak between the ages of 2 to 6. And so while yes, like I'm like, your baby may have been champion eaters, and which normally they are because of that window of opportunity that I talked to you about, where they're most willing to accept new foods. And that's why it is important to shape their food preferences from early on. But when they become toddlerhood and they're like, oh my gosh, they all of a sudden have become picky. There's that word again. They've turned picky and won't eat all the foods that they did when they were babies, when there are, like as mentioned, a lot of these developmental changes that they're happening. So it's just like a phase that you just ride through. And that means that you are not all of a sudden going to be catering to all of their demands. And because they are going to be like, because now they think that they are in charge and they are independent and they'll ask for all of these things now that they can voice their opinions, and start talking. They ask you, I want this or that, and it's important to respect their preferences and to include those foods that they do want, that they're asking for. But at the same time, to not stop offering a variety of foods that you want them to eat eventually. Maybe it won't happen today, maybe not tomorrow, but to continue serving like the meals how you and your family eat. It doesn't mean necessarily like you have to go out of your way to, serve this grand meals to your child that the rest of the family won't normally eat. It's about kind of inviting them in to your family dynamic and meals. And so again, it's that kind of that mentality of also like, I love this, and I always remind myself of this, to add, not subtract. It's not about perfection. I feel like so often we get so caught up in serving, that most perfectly balanced, nutritious meals, and we overcomplicate. Like all of a sudden we feel guilty for giving our kids like Cheerios, goldfish, like peanut butter jelly. And so I always say they're fine. They are perfectly fine. Instead of taking them away, think of like how you can add to it. So like instead of just Cheerios, which by the way, my daughter can just eat like a whole box in one sitting, but like you can serve them alongside some fruit or yogurt or, just something to help kind of round out that meal. And if your child continues to just eat Cheerios, that will happen too, or their favorite foods, that's okay too. I always encourage, like, you may not see the fruit of it right away, but continuing to offer different foods, serving a variety, is so powerful. Exposure is so powerful. Even if they don't touch that food or don't eat it, just seeing it is like familiarity. And the more they feel safe around the foods, because new foods are just like foods, they gravitate towards their favorite. So if they continue to see other foods that initially it might kind of be overwhelming for them, the more they see it, the more familiar they become with it. And familiarity is what leads to acceptance. And so if you stop serving the foods that your child will not eat, and you think it's a waste of food, if you stop serving them though, then you're going to miss that opportunity of when they do. Like you don't know when it's going to happen. So
Right.
I always say, just put it out there and have them see you enjoying it too. Again, role modeling is so important. So if they don't eat the food, then it's like, oh, more for mommy, and you can just enjoy it without saying a word. It's like, oh my gosh, you didn't eat this. I'm going to have to eat it now. Just don't say anything. Just say, oh, I'm going to try this. I'm going to eat this because mommy's hungry or something like that. Just not making a big deal out of it. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer to your question. I just like to just talk and talk and talk. So feel free to stop me at any point.
No, I think you touch on something really important, that perfection is not what we're, aiming for. It's, if I look at the whole month of what my kids have eaten, because I have, been told by doctors and naturopaths, like, just note down what they eat every single day. And I take a look at the entire month. It is so much more well-rounded than a week, than a day, than a meal. And so my whole circumference of how are we doing, what are we needing to course correct as a family comes from looking at it throughout the month. And I think if we kind of have that global vision of nutrition for our children, we're ahead of the game. And then we can anticipate what next month looks like. Like, clearly, when we have holidays, nutrition is hard to really round out. And so that's when I do your method. Add, don't subtract, right? Like, I'll add other things around it to kind of balance it out. If we have a birthday party and I know what they're going to serve at the birthday party, we have a really nutritious breakfast, or dinner has a heavier emphasis on what we missed from breakfast to lunch, or even in our snacks. So I'm at the point where my kids can make their own lunch. And I'm at the point where my kids can also tell me, hey, I want raspberries. I don't want blueberries today. But I want them to always know that it's there. Like, I'm at the stage where I'm like, here you guys go. It's all in the fridge and accessible to you. You guys go make your choices. And then I kind of like watch like the stealthy ninja in the back. And I'm like, okay, what'd they get today? I think there's a really big emphasis. Parents, there's a big stress on packing your kids' lunch for school. And I have my theory on it. My whole goal is to present everything in my little stainless steel bento box that I send my kids to school with. But I also give them things I know they're going to eat that can give them a healthy glucose spike. I'm talking about products with like fruit leathers with honey in them, things like that. So if they're not going to eat some of the items, I know that they're going to get something to sustain them through recess to when they come home to me, and I can kind of help them manage their plate. What are some tips for packing healthier lunches, or lunches they're actually going to eat?
So for me, I know there's just so many like elaborate lunch ideas I've seen, and everybody's going to be different. So I feel like don't feel pressured to do what others are doing, like, cutting sandwiches into like stars and like heart shapes. And that was just never my thing. Well, actually, I take that back. I did do that as a first-time mom, sending them to daycare. But that was just a phase, because now I will not do that anymore. But we go through all those phases, and it's just like, don't compare other people's lunch boxes. Think about what your child likes to eat and what their needs are. And I just mainly just do cold lunch boxes because they're just easy. I don't have to worry about like temperature things or whatnot. And a lot of times I include their favorite things because I want him to eat the things like at school, to last him, give him energy throughout. This is not the time to add new foods or things that they're not going to touch. What makes you think that, if they're not going to eat at home, they're going to eat it at school? This might surprise some people, but like, I always make sure to include foods that people might deem as unhealthy. Like I intentionally add goldfish and Doritos and, like things that, well, I started including Doritos occasionally because he came home and said, all my friends are eating Doritos. What are those? Like, I want to try that. And instead of coming from a place of, oh, no, we don't eat those, I said, oh, you want to try them? I'll add it to your lunchbox. And so it's kind of that teaching them in not like a preachy way about, oh, this food does this and this food is bad because it has these ingredients, or, none of that discussion. But I really just want to empower my kids to kind of make that decision for themselves. Like, I feel like I've done my part in like setting that foundation from early on, and introducing them to a wide variety of foods and flavors and all of that. And so now I kind of give it to them, and now they'll say, I was like, oh, those Doritos were good, but I really like the raspberries,
Yes.
But then at first he said, oh, these are really Doritos. These are really good. Can I have some more and more? So then, yeah, I got a bag and he did. And he was obsessed with it for like a little while. And then he said, he was done with it, and that's kind of what we want them to be, like, not obsessed over because we restrict them from it. But how can we, again, think of ways to add, not subtract? And so I think that is a really important part in developing that kind of healthy relationship with food. So I shared a post a while back about how can we stop calling foods like poison or toxic, or, just adding labels to them, because those languages are really powerful. And then, yeah, the kids can take it literally and be like, oh, that food is toxic, or and it's a scary term for anybody. But what is that doing to our kids? Like, to have this like scared mentality of food, and like we can't eat certain foods. It can go either way. It can make them really scared, or it can make them even more obsessed over it. Like, oh, I can't have that, so I'm going to try more of it. And you won't even believe like the backlash I've received. Like, you are a dietitian and you are like endorsing these foods. Like, wait, I don't understand. Like, are you working with them? Are you getting paid by them? Like, look at all the ingredients. Like, they are like, yeah, it was crazy. Like, it's like, this is why our country is so like obese, and just all of these things. It just kind of reminded me of just how much all or nothing mentality that we as adults have developed in this diet culture really reflects on like how we are feeding our kids. And I really want to change that narrative that like past, like how we were raised, but that doesn't necessarily have to be for our kids. That we want to raise this generation to love their bodies regardless of their size, to appreciate all foods and not be scared by whatever the world is saying to avoid, to say, like, I love ice cream and I love broccoli, and to kind of find that balance and joy.
So for me, I totally get that. And I try to teach my kids, yep, you can go ahead and have another cookie. Just let me know how your body feels after, or pay attention to how it makes your body feel. I try to really teach them to listen to their instincts and what goes on in their stomachs, because I was raised on you can go eat and do whatever you want. I was very fortunate to have a killer metabolism that I still have. Thank you, genetics. But it led me down a path of eating things my body did not agree with and causing incredible GI upset and gut healing journey that took years, that then led to an autoimmune disorder, right? And so I try to just teach them, if you listen to your body on how that feels, man, it will tell you. And it doesn't mean that we don't eat the ice cream. Maybe there's an alternative ice cream that's good, or maybe there's something else out there that will be better for you. Like, cottage cheese ice cream was like a home run for our family, because it really helped. I think that balance of protein in it really helped my kids digest it. Well, who knows? But I try to teach them, if you listen to your body, because my kids are older, they're 6 and 8. So I'm like, if you listen to your body and you eat it and you don't feel good, just note that. It's the same with me. Like, I'm learning it alongside them, right? And so much of our journey is alongside theirs. I love how, now if we could just make a broccoli ice cream, if we could hide an ice cream.
I don't even know if I want that. No. Like, why would we do that?
That'll make it green.
But I'm glad that you did bring that point up, Nicole, about listening to your body. Because, yeah, for some kids, there are foods that you want to avoid because it does upset your tummy or it doesn't do well. But it's all about going back to how can we support them in learning to trust their innate ability to self-regulate, to kind of help them, encourage them to voice those things to you. Like, oh, mommy, it just doesn't feel good. Or because once we start restricting, or like, because we think this is, this is not good for you and whatever, because once we start restricting all of those things, and then only having clean foods around the house, clean, quote unquote, clean foods, because then once they are exposed to goldfish or whatever it is, they're not going to have self-control. Like, they're just going to eat beyond what they are comfortable with. A lot of times, like, and because they know they're not going to get it at home, or that causes like sneaking in foods, or, different behaviors like that. So I think that, yes, just so kind of going back to sort of summing our point of views together, is to allow them, to give them a safe space to explore and to be able to confidently and to voice that, and to share, with us. like how they are feeling and to help them to navigate those phases because food is complicated.
And then it's complicated. I had a moment the other week, and my daughter was like, I want to do hot lunch. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, no. You want to do. Now, my reaction when she said it was straight face. And I was like, all right, I'll look into that for you. Let me figure it out. Right. But in my body, I'm like, I had to realize that it was my trigger to control what's in her lunchbox. Like, what is she eating? And it's because her friends are doing it. It's that pressure. And I was like, all right, well, why don't you try hot lunch? Let me know what you eat. And I've just been kind of like watching her for the month and seeing how she does because it's something she wants to do. I don't want to ever have her think that there's a restriction in food. Even a mentality in our own bodies of restricting food creates that negative, effect, that cortisol level high. And I don't crave that. I want the dopamine and the happy and the endorphins when I eat from the natural goodness I'm putting in my body. No more cortisol when I eat.
Yeah. They learn through it too. Like when you are serving a wide variety of foods and things, they learn without you even teaching them. Like, oh, like I ate too much ice cream. Like that didn't feel good. I need something else to feel. Like they learn from early age, and I just feel like we want to foster that.
Yeah, I want to give both my kids all the tools they need to navigate their food journey because their mom's a big foodie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love food.
So what I want to encourage is that a lot of we are, I don't know, just all this like black and white thinking.
Yeah.
And I want to say there's a lot of gray area. And it's not this all or nothing mentality, that there's just a lot of in between, and we just need to give ourselves plenty of grace and know that we are doing the best we can with what we have. And just think of just little ways that if you feel like, there are ways that you can improve, like, make some simple changes, doable changes, but don't like be so hard on yourself or put so much pressure to do everything all at once, because that is a recipe for burnout and a lot of frustration, which your kids will sense too. And you're not going to enjoy this. I do love feeding my kids. And it's such one of like the greatest joys of being a mother is seeing them, like just preparing the meals with love and all of that. But I just have to remind ourselves just to give ourselves plenty of grace, because feeding kids is hard too. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into it. Just think about just what little changes you can make.
I think that can apply to all of life. It's everything we do in our house. If there's small changes, like when I was non-toxing, I was so overwhelmed to just like throw out the whole kitchen sink, burn the house down. We need a whole new house. And I started one product at a time. And one by one, as it emptied out, I'd replace it with something that was lower toxic or my body could handle better, because it's what I needed to do for my autoimmune. And I remember thinking, gosh, this is the way to do it. Like all that anxiety over making this life change is gone. And that's how I think about food. I'm like, okay, my son didn't eat the cucumber last month. I'm going to try it again, put it on his plate, and he ate it. And I'm like, look, if I had given up, if I had said, no, I'm not going to try anymore, if I had just given in or given up, is usually the two things you end up doing, we wouldn't have made, those small successes, are small wins, are the ones I celebrate the hardest. And the one by one is, I full-heartedly support it. One by one, change one by one is always just so much easier. Okay, we're at the time in the show where I always like to ask a truth or dare question. And I do this because as a home CEO, anybody navigating anything always has like, something happened and we have to pivot our day, right? Whether it be like, hey, your kid's sick, come pick them up from school, or whether, I had to pivot this morning. My daughter was like, I don't like my outfit. And I was like, well, we're going to be late to school, but that's okay. Like, let's get brother to school, dealing with all the emotions of the morning, So truth or dare, your choice. Yeah. Truth. Can you share a moment when you almost gave up your entrepreneurial journey? So I'm taking you now into your business because we didn't get to talk a lot about that. But was there a time when you were like, maybe I just closed this chapter in my life?
I always joke about how I left my 9 to 5 to work at 5 to 9. And working from home is such a blessing. And I am so grateful that I get to be home with my kids and still do what I love. I think that's really important so that I don't lose myself in this whole motherhood and raising littles. But at the same time, it's really challenging because everything is all just muddled together. Like I never clock out. I'm always clocked in. And I felt a lot of guilt around that. Like, I say that I'm doing this all for my kids and all of that. But then I wasn't really making intentional time with him because even when I'm with him, I haven't clocked out. So I'm thinking about my business and what content I'm going to create, what I want to write about, and all of these things while I'm with them. So that was like that was a big struggle for me. And I still struggle with that, actually. Being a mompreneur it's just that ongoing because your brain just never stops and you have all these ideas, but then at the same time, you want to be really present with your family. And so I'm really working towards that. Like I worked with a time management coach, and that really helped me to kind of structure my day so that I know like that at this time I am, I'm doing this and that. So there's a time and place for everything. Because whereas before I felt like, oh, if I don't do this now, when am I going to do it? So that was really helpful. And I've experienced so many burnouts. And so that's when I literally thought it's like, okay. And then it was just the whole the Instagram thing. And I'm going to be really honest, like as much as I'm like, oh, I don't care about the numbers and growth and things. Like I'm like, there was a time when I said, oh, if I just have like 1,000 followers, like I've made it. And then I'm going to be so happy. And then the 1,000 came and I was like, oh, let's go. Next stop, 2,000. Like there was just being that driven person, I feel like I just never sit back to like celebrate my wins and like the goals and the accomplishments. I'm always like, okay, on to the next. And so I'm really working on that kind of self-care and mental, like how can I sustain this? And really finding that right balance with it's a struggle, like with momming and being a good mom and then having my own business. I do think that there you can do both. But you just gotta find, like, you have to set boundaries. And that's what I'm a work in progress. I'm learning that now. Like I've just finished working with my time management coach. So I'm like in the process of putting that into action. But again, just giving myself plenty of grace. Just one day at a time, and putting away my phone has been, I feel like I'm kind of going away from the question more and more, but just some of the tips, like some of the things that I'm doing to help is like putting away my phone, like somewhere like in a box in another room, because otherwise if it's like anywhere near me, like even if when I'm with my kids, I'd be like, oh, let me just check my email. Let me just do this real quick. And then that turns into like 30 minutes or like however long. And so just being really intentional about setting that boundaries, like this is my time with my kids, and really honoring that and fighting for those times because they grow up fast. Time is a thief, and I am learning that. My firstborn, he's 7. I don't know how we got here. And then when I am working on my business to like completely just be in that zone, that's kind of where I am. It's a struggle, but we can do it.
We can do it. There's always a moment where I'm like, am I cut out for this? And then I'm like, yeah, if it helps one other person today, I'm cut out for it. And I just have that mentality. And I've also had to remind myself, like, it's just an email. It's not an animal chasing me.
Yeah. We feel this urgency, like we have to answer right away. But the truth, like, and then I remind myself, it's like that person is probably not by the computer waiting for me to respond, like right now, right then. That was a struggle. Yes, that email thing. Oh my gosh. Yes.
It's true. So, Min, thank you so much for being here with me. I just love chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. Like I was so nervous. I keep saying so. I was so nervous about getting on a podcast because this is my only second one. It was just so fun, and words just flew out, and I know I just ramble a lot, but I hope it was helpful.
I'm sure it was. I mean, you gave so many great tips. Where can we find you? Where can we find your page, your blog? Tell me everything.
Okay, so my blog is called MJ and Hungry Man. So it's actually like my initials are MJ, and then Hungry Man is my husband. But then everybody thinks it's my children, so I don't know. But it was like that pun of like MJ and the Spider-Man, MJ and a Hungry Man. And then my Instagram is kidfriendly.meals.
Awesome. You're the best, man. You have a great day. Thank you so much for being on the pod.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode, Home CEOs. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did and found some nuggets of wisdom, or at least a good chuckle or a good cry. Remember to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on our next episode, which I promise brings more laughs, tips, tricks, and a sense of community with lots of enlightening moments. That's what we're here to do. This is the village you've been looking for. Until next time, keep smiling and stay curious. Shine your light wherever you go on those that are dim. They need it the most. Do something kind for somebody else and put a smile on their face. And move your body for someone who can't. In gratitude, you can. You are worthy. You are abundant. You deserve it. And you keep rocking your home like a biz. Cheers to more success, less stress, and less mess. I'll see you next time on The Home CEO.